So today's webinar is going to be on line of sight. So we'll explain what line of sight is, and we'll touch on overlapping laser data too, because that is a key component of why we want line of sight. I'm just gonna share my screen. I believe that I've got everything. So what we'll do is we will have the introduction. We'll go through what line of sight is, how to keep it kind of like how to place your camera so that it's in good line of sight, overlapping laser data, as I said, and then any questions and answers we'll do at the end. Feel free to ask questions at any point though, and we'll just save them right until the end, and we'll have a little bit of a Q&A session at the very end of this. So you should be able to see on screen, I'm using a very simple tool to try and show this to you. Line of sight is, in basics, is the ability to see from one point of space to another. So an example of this would be when you pick up your Planix or your IMS5 system and you place it down, you take your first scan. The next scan you take, you should be able to see directly line of sight the previous location that you scanned. So that's it basically, pretty straightforward. And we'll go through some of the kind of issues that people often find if they don't follow the line of sight. Examples of how not to do it and examples of how to do it. So what we see on screen right now is a basic example of something that we might receive to be drafted. We're just using a basic floor plan here. The blue dots are your panos. And so what we have here basically is a rough and ready kind of somebody whipped around a house, or this floor, sorry, and they captured this floor. Now, what are the issues here? So let's start with at the top of the stairs. This scan here isn't really well placed. So when you get to the top of the stairs, you want a scan that sits right at the top of the stairs here. So we can see down the stairs. The advantage of this scan location is also that you can see straight into this room above here. There we go. So from here to here, we have line of sight, and we can now see downstairs as well. Now, the problem with this scan location is we have no line of sight to this scan at all. So although this is a good location, typically you would think, we can modify this a little bit. We can take out the, hang on a minute, we do undo. We can move this a little bit so that it covers a number of use cases. So we can still see down the stairs right here. And we can also see into this room here. Let's do that with drawing. So we have, oh, I don't want to drag you. I want to do it on screen. Draw with a line. So I have to keep clicking the annotations every time. So I can see from here to here. And now I can see from here to here. So this is an improvement, but it isn't necessarily the best option because we still aren't getting that great line of sight down the stairs so that the drafters know which way to orient the property. This can cause a couple of problems. One being that your main floor and your second floor, for example, might not be oriented correctly when it's drafted because they don't know how the stairs turn or how they go up or which side it ends up being on. So this kind of adds a bit of a negative impact, but it's doable. Let's go through the rest of these scans quickly. So from here to here, you've got very little line of sight from A to B. Now, this isn't the biggest problem right now. With our system, you can walk through walls, technically. You can click through walls, sorry. So you'd still be able to see this scan, but it's much nicer when you can see it through a doorway. So a line of sight through a doorway would be great. And this line of sight here is possible, but there's no line of sight from here to here, really. It kind of goes through the doorway. You want to even that out a little bit. These spaces would be captured if this door was open, but there's a lot more information that we can provide with the drafting team by improving this process. So although there's line of sight in these situations, and sometimes there's no line of sight, so from here to here, there's no line of sight, and from here to here, there's not much line of sight, but from here to here, there is. So the aim, ideally, is to increase the points that we're connecting these panos. So this can improve your overall alignment, your snappability, for the laser data when it's processed, and basically improve your life on site and in Stitch later on, and improve the quality of the data that you're submitting to the drafting team. I'm going to point out a few key areas here that might be missing. Anyway, so on screen here, we've got a little area without a scan. There's no scan for the closet. This means that on an internal closet, it wouldn't be as big as an issue. But as you see in the center here, there's no scan in this bathroom either. So we're not getting the other side of the wall. And especially if this scan in this location, let's just change this color. This here, I can't change that color, sorry. This in the center here, I don't know if you can see my mouse. The scan in this bathroom with the two basins, there's no scan above it. And if this door is shut, you're not going to get much information. Yes, there's stuff either side, but we can't see what's in these rooms. So having line of sight to objects is also an important key note. Within the bathroom here, there might be a shower curtain, for example, which is not being pulled to one side, so we don't know the depth of the whole bath area. There's no scan here on the right-hand side for this closet. And there's not really a lot of coverage. So you're not giving people options or many very variable places to view a room from. So over here, as you can see, there's a lot more scans. But this does cover many more scenarios. So let's get into this one here. First, we're starting off at the bottom of the stairs. So we've got this scan right here at the stairs. We've got direct overlap of line of sight to here. Let's get that drawing ability back up again. So we have from A to B here, we have a line of sight. And from within this room, we have another option here to view the room from. So nobody's clicking through any walls. There's plenty of overlapping data, and we'll get into what overlapping data looks like shortly. We also have a scan here within the closet. Now, I just want to point out that this closet section here, if this is a full closet, then obviously you can move this out a bit and take a picture that like scan of the closet from the outside there. And the same for this one here. We can always move these out if the closets are full. But ideally, we want to try and get the width and the depth of the closet as much as possible. So whether you have to move some clothes out the way, just make a small adjustment to the clothing within, just make a little gap, take your scan. And these scans that are red here can be disabled. So these are representing disabled scans. So for the closets, disabled, and capturing every single one is quite important due to the fact that we need to know that depth. Now, it's even more important when you come into closets on exterior walls, because if it's on an exterior wall, for example, if we put a box here, just for an example, I'll make that dark gray color. If we had a closet in this house just here, and you didn't capture it, we wouldn't know how far it stuck out. So if you just captured the outside and we can see doors, we have no idea where the surrounding area is. So it's very important on exterior walls, any exterior rooms, anything on an exterior area to basically just ensure that you have captured that. So as you can see, each one of these scans is pointing to at least one or multiple scans, so we can link up against multiple points of reference. Even with disabled scans, the drafters get the laser data. So we're getting all of this connecting data here. So you can see it just start to build up a lot more. So from here to here, perfect line of sight, from here to here, and here into this walk-in closet area. And we can just keep following that through. Disabled scan here, just for that extra data. If there's a half wall or anything, we want to try and capture premium objects, remember? So line of sight to premium objects is important. And we can build this up, and it just gets very complex with the lines, but you can see how everything joins up and everything has line of sight to one another. And this creates a big advantage because you're gathering more laser data, as you can see. So lots and lots of data. This scan right in the middle here that's orange, This is just representing a scan that would be one enabled panel so that people can visualize this within the iGuide itself, and a disabled panel. So the disabled panel is, you've taken a scan in this room, this small washroom, this two-piece here, and you've left the curtain closed over to the bathtub because people have got, all of their toiletries behind there, and you don't want to show that. But we need to know the depth of that. So what you would do is you take one scan that is, let's call this the beauty shot, and one scan where you've opened the curtain and you've got the depth in there. So you've got two scans on top of each other. You haven't had to move the system, but when you get into Stitch later on, what you'll do is you'll check which scan has the open curtain, and you'll then just disable that scan. The data is still available if you've disabled it. So as you can see, lots of overlapping data points here, lots of line of sight from A to B, B to C, etc. We also have a video on this, so if you want more information, we can post that at the end.
Yeah, I'll have that available.
Yeah, so this is kind of what we'd like it to look like. The scan points, there's a lot more scan points here compared to the other version. Now, there's a happy medium between this too. This doesn't mean that you have to take 1 million scans for each property, but you do have to try and remember line of sight, and not just for data collection, but your client's kind of experience. So your client is the realtor, but their clients are homeowners or home buyers, sorry, that are looking to purchase the home. So they're going to go and view the iGuide and navigate around this home. The more points of interest you add or available points you add to an iGuide, the more they're going to be able to look around the home, and it's going to be a better experience than having to click through walls or not being able to see a certain section because you didn't capture it.
To reiterate a point you made earlier as well, having all of these extra scans will mean that the data will align while you're on site. And so that'll really save you a lot of time in the stitching process later on. So it may look like you're doing more work while you're on site, but this is actually going to save you a lot of time in the processing section of Stitch.
Yeah, and as we know, each of these scans takes about 20 seconds to process. So even a two-shot mode one, which is 40 seconds, if you add an extra 5 to 10 scans per floor, you're adding out an extra 2 to 3 minutes maximum, which isn't, I'm not a on-site photographer, so I don't know the time constraints, but typically that will allow you to have a better product and a better deliverable for your clients. So over time, you'll get used to where to place it, and good line of sight and a happy medium with practice and education.
Exactly that. And really, you want to focus, as you're getting started, accuracy over speed.
Yeah, absolutely. So for anybody who's new, over documentation is not a problem. The more scans you take, the better when you're first starting out. And iGuide isn't charged at how many panels you take. It's obviously depends on which type you are. If it's a radix, obviously it's based upon how many you take. But for a standard iGuide that's being drafted, the amount of panels doesn't make a huge difference. You'll just have to disable a couple more, or it might be a little bit confusing in the tour at first for people to navigate. Too many spots, for example. But you can always disable them later on. So on-site capturing, you can go overboard as much as you like. You can over capture, you can practice, and then you'll be able to slowly reduce that as the time goes on.
Yeah, once you learn what sort of sections you can maybe cut corners on, if you will.
So this is the basics of line of sight. Just make sure from one panel to the next, you can facilitate that. Now, there are some other caveats with line of sight too that aren't too extreme. Okay, so just an example here. The placement of a scan can be quite important, and you can facilitate having, one or multiple scans if you're a little bit smart with how your placement is. So for this one here, if we opened both closets and took a single scan between the two, if there's enough data, you can do that. That's not a problem. You can, instead of taking 2 scans, take 1 and just use a little bit of smart so that you have line of sight and make sure the laser can hit the back wall. For this scan here, we could easily move this to here, make sure that there's line of sight on multiple areas. So we have line of sight from here to here. We have line of sight from here to here. We have line of sight from here to here. So this facilitates a number of functions. For example, placing this scan up here, you're collecting extra data down here, but you haven't got line of sight. So it facilitates like just moving it down a little bit, assists with that. So this scan here, if we were to do it in this method where you've got one door open, two doors open, you could technically move this scan up and you're still getting plenty of overlapping data, and there's enough line of sight to be able to navigate into that room, right into that footprint there. So if we put it right in the doorway, but what you going to want to do is increase or decrease the distance between them. So we can either have something like this, where you have an additional scan here, and it's kind of more centered, so that you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. This works quite well too. So as you can see, the placement of the scans kind of allows you to lead on to other things. So you can reduce the amount of scans by checking, hey, how many doorways can I capture in this one scan? Instead of just being in one doorway, for example, or over here in this one, in this doorway here. You can place it so you can have line of sight into multiple rooms. And then when you go to those rooms, just make sure that where you took this from, you can see it. So you wouldn't go into here and capture this straight away. That's quite a distance. And you're also missing out on this area down here by the stairs. So although this is a half railing, you kind of want to make sure that you're capturing a little bit more overlapping data. So back here is better. And also, if you bring it too far in, you're not going to get a great line of sight into here. So, 1 to 2 to 3 is pretty good. We could go on about this for ages, like lots of different methods or ways of doing it, but ideally it's something that you would pick up and learn and kind of, get used to doing it well on site.
Go ahead, Sam.
No.
Just to touch on the closets.
So you go ahead. Touch on the closets.
Yeah, just to touch on the closets, the single panel option definitely could work well. When there is a divide between the two, we would want to have documentation of that single divider wall between the two closets, because we may not capture that data if there isn't a panel in front of each one. So it's really going to depend on the scenario.
Yeah. So this wall here might not be drafted in if you don't capture it. So adding notes as well is pretty good. So if you know that there's a wall here, but you couldn't capture it because of all the stuff in the way, people's closets tend to be jam-packed, just leave a note on screen, and we can do that within Stitch, and I can show you that later. So unless you have something more to add, Andrew, we can move on to the Stitch data.
No, I think we can move on. I've had some examples from some operators actually who are fans of baseball tell me that as long as you can toss the baseball from one panel to the next, imagining there's someone standing there and catching it and passing it on to the next one, there's your line of sight if you want a literal example.
Yeah. So Mark has a bit of a statement here. This is more of a statement than a question. I suppose I find the line of sight is not always possible due to placement of furnishings, mirrors, etc. That's a fair point. What we're trying to pass through here is that, like, try and observe this when possible. Like, if it's impossible, maybe you could increase the amount of scans that you're doing to facilitate that line of sight for overlapping data purposes. Take scans in front of mirrors. I know a lot of people try to avoid mirrors due to seeing the camera in the actual reflection. But if you take a scan and disable it, it assists with that overlapping data, so you're able to snap the data easier. The drafting team have additional data and overlapping data, and that's what we're going to move on to now anyway. So what I want to do is just go through, like, obviously this process method here. So you've got 1 up here, 2, so we've got plenty of overlapping data because we've got line of sight. 3, line of sight again, 4, 5, 6, and we'll go through the whole project shortly. So if I go to remove some of these scans, I can show you what it would look like without that overlapping line of sight or an increased overlapping data. So let's just move some of these out of the way so you have a visual there. Here we have 3 scans that are technically within line of sight. 1, 2, 3. But the data is very sparse. And you can see that there's not a lot of overlapping data. So if I double click on this one, yes, I'm moving my mouse. So come on. I'm rolling double click. Okay. So if we look at the data here that's overlapping, we can see how much is getting captured here. So although we have line of sight directly, there's not a lot of data overlap. As you can see, the blue kind of dots here indicate that. There's not a lot of data, and it's very sparse at that. It's not very dense. So it's going over a long distance, and it's just about snapping in place. So we look here, It's very difficult to place this and know, is it back here? Is it up here? Whereabouts does it exactly go? This is probably about right, but when you see that, there's a little bit of data down here that doesn't line up properly. And that's because it's going over a far distance, and there could be other affecting factors, like the wall's sheen, for example, could throw off a laser, any laser at any point. So how reflective that wall is could be. It could be that it needs adjusting like this, a slight rotation. But as you can see, it never really fits. But by increasing the amount of data points we have, it gets fixed. So let's go to Stitch, because this is, everybody knows Stitch. Okay, so I've actually removed a bunch of scans from in here. And as you can see, there is line of sight and there's overlapping data, but very little. So if we move this scan here, and we hit 3 in Stitch, it's going to snap it, but you haven't got a lot to go on. Like, as you can see, these dots down here, they're sparse. The dots here are pretty sparse. So this is an okay example. So because we've got line of sight here all around the house. But as you can see, there's like black areas, there's some missed spaces. There's no line of sight from over here to over here. The only way for this to connect is through this doorway. And it's very sparse, the data that comes through here. And so we're relying on the connections at the back end over here to come back to this. So it becomes very difficult. So if I replace one of these scans here with a scan that, not that one, where is that scan? It's earlier on, so let's move in. Could it be this one? This one here is a good example. See, it has line of sight. And even in this one here, you have that overlapping data, but just about. You can see that here the wall matches up. The wall matches up here. So the more overlapping data we get, the easier it is to basically snap everything together. So we go from panel single number 1 here to panel number 2. We can see how much overlapping data there is as we build it out. So line of sight equals overlapping data here. So the next scan, just going to pull that over. We look at this here, you can see it's just about to fit, and we can snap that very easily. So Survey does the same thing as it goes through. It looks for these points of overlapping data and puts them in the right place. So we can see here, this data moves into place. We've got that overlapping data down here. We've got overlapping data down in the left corner. And we have overlapping data just here in this room. So this is going to snap quite nicely. We have it all up here, lots of overlapping data. And this is the premise of how the scans actually snap together for you. So by observing line of sight and increasing that availability of data, it's going to be a lot easier for you in the long run. Eventually, just going to undo everything. Apart from that, it's flipped. Eventually, you want to build something that looks like this. So you have lots of overlapping data. So you get this thickness, this density to these walls here. And that helps the drafting team greatly because they're not wondering, is this covered? What is this? What's this area? What's this blank space? And we do have visuals, obviously. So you'll get times where you'll hit a mirror or you'll hit a window and the wall looks black. That's fine. We have these, that's what we have the visuals for. It's not a problem. To visualize this as well, there's this fill tool, and you can see here how much like overlapping data there is. The higher the density or the color is, the more overlapping data we have. You can turn that on in Survey too. So do we have Survey still open? Nope, I closed it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Within the settings of Survey, you can show this as you're on site. So you can increase the percentage overlap here. We've been finding line of sight does get missed out and overlapping data gets missed. And one of the biggest things we've been seeing recently is with, if you're a commercial shooter, long hallways. Yes, the data goes a long way, as we can see from a scan here, just in this like, smaller house. It goes all the way to the back there, all the way through. The problem is, the further away it gets, the more scattered it gets. And because the laser works in a rotary way, so it's sending out, lasers at different radius, what happens is that they begin to scatter and get further apart the further away it goes. So when you start looking at walls, for example, straight long walls, I don't have an example here, but maybe up here a little bit. See how dense the data capture is here? Each dot is very dense, and it's pretty, that's the kind of quality we're looking for. The further away it gets along a straight wall, it starts to get scattered as the radius increases. And then it gets here and it hits all the points because it's straight on. But anything on an angle tends to lose the amount of points of data. You can see lots, very few, and lots over here. So what we want to do is fill those gaps in by taking additional scans. So if you're in a hallway, we recommend maybe about 6 to 8 feet distance. We know that the camera can go a long distance. The laser, sorry, goes a long distance, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily collecting the data that you need. Basically, just make sure that everything that you capture, there's plenty of overlap. If you're low on time, just rely on line of sight to do that for you. Sometimes you might capture within a door frame. I don't have an example in this one. You might capture in a doorway, but the camera is on one side of the door. Let's see if we remove this. Let's see if we can just use this as an example. It might be enough. As you can see here, you get very little data. So there's enough to snap, but there's not too much because you've got the constraints of the doorway blocking it. So the laser can only see through these points. So by adding that extra scan that we got rid of, point here, you can see how it kind of bridges the gap, which means that it can be aligned better. You can see that there. So if I align these two together now, and then add an extra scan, these are a little bit more perfected because of that additional data in both rooms. You can see here, it's capturing all along here, and it's capturing all in here, and then this one obviously overlaps and fills in the gaps everywhere else. So being close to doorways is pretty good, and being inside doorways is quite good. Realistically, you kind of want to be a little bit further over here, and if you can, over here, so that you're getting this wall data up here and down here, instead of just getting, door frames within this. So here we just got a door frame. So we go just on the outside of the door frame here, and then maybe just on the inside here. That's even better because you're capturing even more wall data. So yeah, we'll move on to questions. And Mark has asked a question here, and it's a good one. Does the drafting prefer that doors be opened all the way or partially closed? I've been closing doors partially so that the door edge faces the camera to get maximum amount of wall space, if that makes sense. So typically what you can do is, if you want to be really thorough, you can do one with door open, door closed. But what you need to do is when you go into a room, you need to leave that door open. So here's a quick example. Let me wonder if I can show you here.
There we go.
This might be better.
Yes.
So for example, if you're capturing an image in a room and you want the door shut, what you'd want to do is capture here so that you've got line of sight into the room, door open, capture here with the door open so that you've got that data that can snap. And then when you go further into the room, you can shut the door so you get this back wall edge. Now, you don't necessarily need to do that because what happens is from this point here in the center, I don't know whether I'm going to be able to do this right, but we'll see. Where is my annotation device? This is going to look weird. What happens is, as the laser collects the data, say, for example, there's a door here. Let's put a door in. Let's pretend that you open the door and it's here. So that's a block right there. That's blocking the laser data. Back to my line, change the color just for example's sake. And what's happening is you're getting this laser data come out and hit this door from the center here. This is going to be a dreadful drawing.
No, this works well.
But this is what happens. The laser hits the door. It's hitting all the walls, but it's also hitting this wall back here. It's hitting the wall here. It's hitting the wall all the way up here. So what we do is we would project that wall all the way through. So let's change the color to green, just for changing the difference. What the drafting team would do is they'd see that and they'd project this wall all the way up here. So even though you don't have data behind the door, we know from the exterior surrounding data here that these walls most likely, probably 99% of the time, intersect. Now, there's the odd occasion where that you might find that behind this wall right here is something that bumps out, like some kind of bump in the this is part of kind of whether this might be a utility area. So you've got pipes or something coming up. Typically, doors don't go as high as ceilings. So the drafting team uses the visuals within the pano to see that, and they'll draft that in to the best of their ability. So if we get off this here, clear that off. We go to stitch, for example. When you're capturing, let's see if we've got an example here. I always do that. I always go too far. And then just, as you can see here, we can see the ceiling and everything. There isn't any doors in here. Let's see if this one will work. As you can see, this is taken with the door open, but we can see the visuals. So this ability to scroll up and down within a pano also exists in our drafting software. So typically, if a door is left open like this, you can see up here. We can see behind and see what's going on behind in the wall. So we'll draft that in too. Generally, I recommend shooting an entire home with the doors open because that allows more overlapping data. It's easier access line of sight. And then when people are navigating through it, it's nice to go from pano to pano through an open doorway than through a closed door frame or closed door. So it depends on how diligent you want to be with your capturing, Mark. So you can do it that way, or you can leave the door open and capture through, or you can come in, shut the door. But I find personally, like this is my personal preference, that if you've captured a room and the door's shut, it doesn't give you a view from, say, here outside the door. So it's just kind of makes places feel more open and less closed in. I don't know. That's just a personal preference or not, So yeah. And it gets difficult in tight spaces. Like this area here is a tight space too. So you just put the system in. You've kind of gone and hidden around the corner over here, and you're taking the shot. And you're opening the curtain, you're taking a shot from around the corner. But try and get in as many places as you can. That's kind of the trick. Just get it in there and take some pictures. It doesn't matter how bad it looks because you can disable that. The data is what's important. Okay, well, we'll end it there today. Thanks for your time, everybody, and take care.